Hey, it's Callan from Authentic Lifestyle Design, and today I want to talk to you about the concept that men get better with age. I think this is something that's really important because so many young men in their teens or their 20s, they're struggling, the male suicide rate, if you didn't know, is about well, it depends who you listen to, it's about 3 to 5 times higher than it is for women. So clearly there's issues affecting men that aren't really being addressed as much by society. They're things that exist and that hurt people, but they're not really talked about. So I want to talk to you about the fact today that as a man, you're on a different time scale than what society says you are. For example, a lot of men think they've got to grow up from school, they have to go and get an education, they have to be able to provide for a family, they've got to find a girl, they've got to settle down and have kids, right? And if a man's, say, 28, 29, and they don't have a girl and they're not ready to have children, men start to panic and men start to go, what am I doing with my life? I'm behind. I don't have the support or the means to support a family. I don't even know what I want to do with my life. I'm so confused and I'm so lost and I'm trying to make things work, but I just can't do it, right? They go along these thoughts. But the reality is that men are on a different time scale than what the media says. Women, it's different, all right? For a woman, if you're 29 and you haven't found the right guy and you're not kind of getting ready to settle down and have a family in the next 5 years or so, then for a woman that is worrying because they're on a different timer, because their biological clock is running out, their looks will deteriorate, into their 30s at some point, they'll start going backwards, and their fertility drops. So that's, a big thing for women in their lives. For men, you don't have that, and for men, you're on another time scale. Men operate differently. So essentially, your 20s as a guy isn't this period where you have to sort everything out so you can have a family or so you can do all this stuff. You're like your late 20s, early 30s. Your 20s for a man is basically a window to try and become the most awesome version of yourself you can, which it can be for women as well, but men have more time. Like if you look at, and again it's a bit of a full-on term, but it's called sexual market value. It's basically economics as far as sex and sexual partners, right? But generally what people have figured out through numerous surveys and questionnaires and stuff is that the most attractive woman deemed by society, as far as just physical attraction, that's about 22, 23. Right? That's sort of the sexual peak for women according to the majority of people that are surveyed. For men, what do you think it is? Do you think it's 25? Do you think it's 30? Do you think it's 50? Well, the actual answer is it's about 36. So society deems men the most attractive sexually when you're 36. So then you've got some 22-year-old running around wondering why they can't attract women and why they can't do this stuff, right? And reality is they're so far from their peak. If they're 22, they're 14 years away from 36. They're 14 years away from their peak. So, it makes sense. It's just society's telling you one thing. Hollywood movies are showing you one thing, right? They're showing you that you should be slain in your teens or your 20s, when for most guys that's not true. For most guys, you're a little bit of a loser still when you're 20. You've got to build up to it. You've got to develop yourself, right? And you get a massive decade, 10, 15, 20 years to do that. And it's up to you if you do that or not. But doing that's going to make your life so much better. So men do get better with age. Imagine the difference. Who's more attractive to a woman? You've got a 20-year-old guy or a 25-year-old guy. Say 25-year-old guys just finished uni. Maybe they're on their first job and they're just getting by, or maybe they're even at university and they're not really making any money and they're living in a share house with a bunch of party guys and they're just going out drinking every weekend and exploring and all of this. That's your first guy. Your second guy's 35, maybe he's got a business, he's got 3 blokes working for him, he makes a healthy 6-figure income, he has his own house, he has the time and freedom to go on holidays and to take the girl to cool places and all that. As a girl, again, with girls wanting that security, they want a provider, even if they don't want that directly. Their mixing up my words. Even if they don't directly want that, their biology screams for it, right? They could ignore that. But their biology, if they're in their feminine, screams for that kind of provider, masculine archetype, right? The same as your biology as a man screams for a nice, feminine, submissive, like, kind woman. And it's the same thing. You know, they're biological impulses. You don't have to follow them, but you're going to feel them. So what that means, what do you think the girl, again, prioritizing security, because in nature they needed security to trust a man to have kids with him, because if they had kids with the wrong man and he ran off, she could have been in serious trouble. So because of that, which one do you think the girl's going to be more attracted to? A guy that has nothing to his name yet, or a guy that's established himself? And the reality is, not many guys establish themselves in their 20s. To be honest, not many guys establish themselves ever, but you get time. Because if you can go through your 20s working on yourself, you get to your 30s, and all of a sudden you have a lot more power, you have a lot more influence, and you can make things happen. And that's going to make you far more attractive. So as a man, you're going to peak in like your mid to late 30s, right? And the decline starts then, but your decline can be pretty slow. I mean, if you look after yourself, you can still be proper hot in your 40s. You can kind of rock the silver fox vibe as you go into your 50s and maybe even your 60s. So it depends. What do you want in your life, you know? But if you're 20 or you're 25, then don't stress about these tiny little things. Don't stress about feeling like you're behind or like you're not where you want to be, all right? Or doing what I did once and researching the average income and realizing I didn't make that at the time. I do now, but I didn't at the time. And going, because in my mind I'm thinking, every 20-year-old's on like 80 grand a year or whatever it was. And not true, you know? That's the whole population. Most people peak in their income in like their 40s and 50s. So as a guy, you can chill out a bit. Like, obviously hustle, work hard to develop yourself, because it'll have a compounding effect. If you work on yourself and develop yourself now, you'll become an extraordinary person. And all those little habits and little things you learn and do, and if you start a business or you start a few businesses just to see what you want to do, your 20s is when you do that. You know, you might start 3 businesses and they fail, and then you start your 4th business at 31, and all of a sudden that clicks and that takes you somewhere. So there's no point in stressing about any of these things, because you will continue to get better. You're on a different timing schedule. A lot of men are thinking in the female schedule, where they're thinking, okay, by 30 I'm going to lose my physical attractiveness and then I'm not going to be able to get a good girl, right? That's not true at all. That's complete, like, cultural indoctrination, essentially. It doesn't mean anything. For a woman, that does mean something. If you're 30, 35, then that is going to limit your potential in dating. As a guy, it's not. As a guy, it's probably going to make it better, right? Because most women want a man, not a boy. And no offense, but at 20, you're not quite a man yet. You're still on that path. By 25, maybe you're getting closer, but you're probably still not there. So you keep doing that work. And this is the reason, like, there's 2 hotspots for male suicides. The first one's in the late teens, early 20s. For that very reason, men feel like they've failed. Men aren't getting what they want out of life. You know, they don't have the peer group or the freedom or the women or whatever it is, and that makes them miserable. Especially when their biology is pushing them for that and they can't achieve it. Again, because it usually takes more time. Usually takes a decade to establish yourself. So, totally different scenario. The other hot spots for men is in their 40s, and that's usually when men reap the karma of making dumb decisions in the past, like they married the wrong person, or they never focused on their finances, or whatever else it is. That's when they start to have like a midlife crisis. Which, if you do the work now in your 20s and you had this depression in your 20s, you can kind of avoid the one in your 40s, because you can build yourself up in a really cool way and have a really cool circle, because that's a long time you've got to build that. And if you're listening to channels like this one, you're listening to videos like this one, by the time you are 30, your head's going to be so full of knowledge and you're going to have so much experience in so many things that you'll be able to absolutely crush life. Okay? Because if you're watching a video like this, again, it's a small channel. I don't really think YouTube drives any traffic to it yet. If you're stumbling across something like this in the deep, dark cavern of YouTube, then you've probably got a really strong hunger for self-improvement. And when you're 20, if you're self-improving and someone isn't, you don't really notice it. You don't notice it for another decade or so, because again, like investing your money, investing in yourself and your own development has a compounding effect, and that'll escalate through your life. So if there's a 20-year-old working hard and working on himself and another 20-year-old who's not, you're not going to notice. But if you look at the same two men at 35, the difference is going to be so obvious in every way. So don't stress, just know that men get better with age, okay? You get people that are black pill, meaning they're kind of nihilists as far as sex goes, and they say, oh, if you're not born with a perfect face and you're not over 6 feet tall and you're not all these things, and it's basically over for you. And that's not true, right? You know, I know people under 6 feet that aren't even that attractive and they slay because they've got confidence, because they are sure of themselves, right? Obviously, any advantage is an advantage. You know, any advantage you have is an advantage, and you can't control some things. You know, you can't control your height. You're just whatever height you are. You know, I am legally blind with my eyes. I can't control that. That's just how it is. Does that mean I'm not going to date? Of course not. Does that mean I'm not going to go and chase my dreams? Of course not. It's just something that I have to adapt to. It's a card I was dealt, and we're all dealt different cards. Some are good, some are bad. That's just how we go. That's just how life moves. So if you're depressed now in your 20s, don't stress, because as long as you do the work, as long as you make something of yourself, which is not as hard as you'd think, because not that many people are doing it. Most people are happy to just cruise. You know, they get to 25 and they've got their job and maybe they've got a girlfriend and, you know, whatever it is, and they just stay, they just settle, they, you know, cash in their chips and they're content with that. But if you're not, keep going, keep climbing to a level where you are content. That probably won't be the top. I mean, you don't want to spend your life just trying to climb hierarchies. Or maybe you do. Some people are attracted to that. I'm not personally attracted to that. But I do want to be at a level that's higher than what I am now. And that's going to take me, 5-10 years to get there. And that's okay, because you enjoy every step of that journey. And I understand that 30-year-old me, I'm 25 now, that 30-year-old me is going to be a lot better than 25-year-old me. And then 35-year-old me is probably going to be a lot better than 30-year-old me. So that just makes sense, In 5 years, I'll probably be double what I am now in most ways. And that's just how it is. Again, there's a compounding effect. You invest your money, it compounds. You invest in your body, it compounds. You invest in your skill to attract and date women, that compounds. You invest in your knowledge, that compounds. You invest in your circles and you meet new interesting people, that compounds, because that opens more opportunities to you, better parties or, business ideas or whatever it is. So don't stress about it. If you're in your 20s or your late teens, if you're in your teens, you're still a baby. But you essentially are going to grow with age, as long as you work on yourself, as long as you do what it takes to, get a nice, comfortable job and a relative amount of time that you can do what you want to do with, then you're set. And if you can be content with that, because again, you look at a monk, they don't have anything materially, but they're very happy people, right? Or you look at hippies, kind of the same. They don't usually have much materially, but they're very happy people. So if you can pull some things from those lifestyles and understand you don't need a fancy house, you don't need a fancy car, because you don't want to slave yourself to debt. You don't need that stuff. You need a house that meets your needs. Like when I bought a house, I could have bought some fancy crazy thing and paid a stupid mortgage, right? But I basically went, all right, I want a 2-bedroom so someone can live with me. I want a little courtyard, but I don't really want a yard. And I want it to be like a unit so that there's a strata that can do everything. So now I've got a house, it's central, it's close to things, it's in an area that's appreciating. It's got everything I need it to have, but it doesn't have excessive things. It's not this huge thing that's going to take ages to look after and that's going to rip a huge chunk out of my bank account. So look at life like that. Minimalism's a key, and minimalism's going to allow you to become more successful, because whatever it is you want is probably way more achievable, and you can have that by 35. You could also retire earlier if you wanted to, because you're going to have more savings. So yeah, men do get better with age. Just let that reassure you. And that's how it's kind of always been. The elders in a tribe have always been respected. Especially the men, they were the teachers. They were the wise people that bestowed knowledge onto the younger people. And the way we sometimes treat our elderly in the West is kind of criminal because, a lot of people just shut them away in homes and discard them because we're scared of death. The West is scared of death, so it kind of tries to hide from death. A lot of cultures aren't. They embrace death, they understand death, they see death. When in the West we don't, we're shielded from that. And because of that, we're kind of scared of old people because it reminds us that we're going to be there one day. So if you gained anything from this video, hopefully it inspired you that as you grow older, you will get better and more doors are open to you if you choose to develop yourself. Obviously, if you go down a negative pathway and say you take a bunch of drugs or you do something that's going to hurt you, and you do that for a decade, that'll compound the other way. You might actually get worse. But for most of us, we're going to get better. We're going to improve. We're going to develop ourselves. And you'll attract the people. You'll attract really quality people if you turn yourself into a quality man. If you want to attract quality, you have to be quality. If you want quality friends, quality relationships, quality business partners, whatever it is, you have to be quality yourself. So if you gained from this video, give it a like for me, subscribe, share it with anyone you think it will help. If you know a man that doesn't understand this concept, doesn't see that men get better with age, share it with them. Just give them that reassurance that they're on a path that things are going to be better, especially when they're in their 20s, because 20s can be probably the most depressive decade for most men. So yeah, apart from that, peace out. Enjoy the rest of your day.